The talk of all the different news stations nationwide has been the tropical storms and then also this heat dome that's making its way into the Great Lakes region tomorrow. In this video, I'm going to talk about that heat dome specifically and then also how that heat dome that's moving from the Midwest could possibly bring us the potential for a couple days of severe weather later on this week. Hello everybody, time is 12:49 p.m. and it is August 22nd. We are not far from September and we're not far from that Labor Day weekend as well, so hopefully everybody's doing well today. This is a shot from the Blue Ridge Parkway in Blowing Rock, North Carolina. You can see the mountains all across the view, those valleys. Very beautiful area out there. Temperatures were in the 70s and the sun was out during that week, which was making it very nice, and I'm sure a lot of people across the Great Lakes region felt that cooler air as well. That cooler air is coming to an end, and it's probably going to be gone through about Saturday. All right, so that's why we have a few advisories and watches out for heat. And not only that, but Michigan is going to be sitting on the edge of the heat dome. What does that mean? Well, if we start to lose that capping inversion, which I'll explain that a little bit later, we could see the potential for a few severe thunderstorms. And depending on how it sets up, we could have some pretty big thunderstorms, and it looks like most of those storms will be nocturnal, but still some things to keep track of with regards to this upcoming severe weather setup. So let's get right to it. I want to go over all the different outlooks for the upcoming couple of weeks because it does appear that there is potential for the next 3 days. So we'll begin with the Upper Peninsula. Okay, you can see it right here. Upper Peninsula, you have a marginal risk for severe weather, and then also in northwestern Michigan. This is likely going to occur later on at night. Okay, there is thunderstorms that are ongoing up in that area and rainfall, but I do think that threat's really going to focus later on in the night. You can notice that there's no tornado threat unless you're down in Texas. As a matter of fact, they have several tornado warnings out right now as I'm talking on this video. You have some damaging wind threats across places associated with tropical storm or post-tropical storm Hillary. Now it's just a low-pressure system. The real threat from these storms that's going to be up in the Great Lakes region is going to be the hailstones, okay? So that's kind of the thing you're going to want to watch out for if you're in that marginal risk area. Not really looking at damaging winds. Damaging winds could be possible. Not looking at tornado threat. Looking more along the lines of hail. And I'll explain why that is in just a second. This is associated with that ridge that's going to be lifting off into our area from the Midwest. Okay, you can notice that there is not too much. You would think that with a hot and humid air mass, you would have a lot more severe weather setups out here. That's not the case, and I'm going to explain why that is in just a second. But you do notice there's a marginal risk for severe weather across northwestern Michigan and the parts of the Upper Peninsula as well. And those thunderstorms could make it down to southern lower Michigan by morning. More along the lines of maybe 8 or 9 o'clock, but those will likely dissipate as we go on into the day. Not only that, we are dealing with heat and lots of it, okay? There's a lot of colors here, multicolored map for you here, and all of these different colors you see here are different heat warnings, okay? So this has to do with the different hazards that we have with this ridge that's building in and this record-breaking heat wave. It's likely going to be record-breaking across much of the Midwest. So all these purple areas are excessive heat warnings, okay? Those excessive heat warnings are for dangerously hot temperatures, temperatures you do not really want to be outside in. Definitely, if you're in Michigan today, get your yard work done today because it is going to be very hot, particularly in these areas in southwest Michigan on Tuesday. This area on Wednesday might be cooler, but not the case on Thursday, okay? So this area on Thursday is definitely not going to want to wait to mow their grass until we get to Thursday. It should probably be done today or tomorrow. Down here, it's going to be nice and cool for the first half or for much of the day today, okay, where the heat advisories and the excessive heat watches are currently out, okay, unless you're in the southern portion of that. Excessive heat warnings, heat indexes could get up to 110 in some spots, and I'm not saying that to exaggerate. That's actually going to be the case, okay? This is a pretty big heat wave. So, excessive heat watches are in the brownish reddish color you have there. Southern Ohio, western Ohio, much of the entire state of Indiana is under excessive heat alerts right now, and then the border counties of Michigan are under an excessive heat warning as well. Now you may notice, why isn't Michigan under all these different watches and alerts? Well, keep in mind, we have the lake. Okay, the lake helps to cool us down, especially areas along the lakeshore probably won't see as significant of heat as areas inland will. Okay, keep in mind that that lake has an influence. That lake also has an influence on severe weather that will probably be occurring across eastern parts of Michigan, and that there might even be some tornado potential in eastern Michigan on Wednesday. But there's still a lot of questions with regards to that setup. But any places where you see excessive heat watches, excessive heat warnings, definitely want to be staying hydrated, staying in those air-conditioned areas. It's definitely going to be hot. Heat advisories, you're going to have some heat. You're going to be dealing with some heat indexes over 100 probably in some spots. Definitely going to want to exercise caution if you are working outside, and preferably maybe just chill with the air conditioning for a while and take a nap. That'd be kind of nice. Anyway, so that's the hazards for the Great Lakes region as they stand right now. These will either be upgraded to excessive heat warnings or heat advisories come later on. So that's something to just wait for. All right. Let's go to the models and see exactly what is projected for the heat indexes. Now, don't let this scare you just yet. In fact, you shouldn't be scared at all. But don't let this scare you just yet. The wind chill heat index values, okay? This is just what it feels like outside. Okay, it's not actually the real air temperature. The real feel, this is what it feels like outside, okay? So, let's progress and go to Wednesday morning. Now, you notice this heat ridge is starting to shift a little bit to the east, where you saw those areas to the west. It's looking more prominent and now into the east. So, this is around 10 a.m. You see heat indexes getting into the mid-80s across much of Indiana, much of southwest Michigan, and then also getting into the 90s near the Lake Michigan shoreline. Now keep in mind that the places that are likely to see less influence from this heat are these regions around the western side of Michigan, because again, you have the breeze going across the lake over Lake Michigan and coming on the western side. So that's just something to keep in mind there. All right, so you notice that on this model here, but inland, look at those temperatures getting up to, feels like temperatures getting up into the 90s, and then as you get down to southwest Michigan, you're getting to the 100s, okay, even up to 105 in some spots, okay. Northwest Indiana getting close to 110 at that point. Notice down in the southeastern portion that you have some cooling down of the temperatures across parts of the southwest Indiana, across parts of Ohio. It's probably not going to be the case Thursday, okay? Some of this is also going to have to do with the humidity, the amount of moisture that we are going to have present in the atmosphere. But look, as we get into the afternoon, you notice that those temperatures max out at about 110 across Elkhart area, 107, 109 across the southern counties of Michigan. And then you kind of notice this really distinct boundary here where this heat ridge is. That is where that severe weather potential for Wednesday could potentially set up right along this boundary of this heat ridge, okay? And that's why the day 2 outlook for Wednesday shows a marginal risk for severe weather. Now, there's going to be a lot of questions with all these different threats over the next few days. May not happen, may happen. Why do I say that? Well, there's something that's going to be in the atmosphere associated with most heat domes that occur. It's called a cap. Okay, what a capping inversion is let me show you that in the models real quick. Let's go to something on Wednesday. Okay, as we get to Wednesday afternoon, there's potential for some thunderstorms. Okay, what a capping inversion is, and this model doesn't actually show a capping inversion, but let me see if I can find one that does. Okay, because capping inversion is a good. Let me just take a random sounding from the heat dome, and if I can find one that has a capping inversion. Wow, kind of hard to find it right now. But what a capping inversion basically is if you look at this red line here and this dashed line here, one thing we look for with a capping inversion is when the temperature, that red line there, exceeds that of the dashed line, which is called a lapse rate. Now, what is a lapse rate? Well, a lapse rate is the typical amount that a parcel of air will cool as it rises a certain kilometer into the atmosphere, okay? When we see the temperature exceed that of the lapse rate, that means that air is not cooling in such a fashion that would allow it to condense, okay? So if we have that capping inversion, it kind of prevents any convective development from occurring if the cap is strong enough, okay? The Euro doesn't really depict the cap that is currently being shown by other models, but there is certain models that are showing a significant cap in the atmosphere, particularly the GFS and some places the NAM, that is showing this capping inversion that could possibly prevent any storms from firing. So that's why all these hazards are remaining marginal risk. Okay, that doesn't mean that if the severity of the storms is going to be low. That doesn't mean that at all. Rather, it means the potential for a widespread outbreak is low, mainly because of that capping inversion. Okay, but that doesn't tell you the severity of a thunderstorm in a localized area. So keep that in mind. These storms could be very strong if they break through that cap and they fire off really strongly. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind. Okay, when the SPC issues forecast, it has to do with the potential for a widespread outbreak, not the level of severity of thunderstorms. So just keep that in mind. All right, so hopefully that was a good enough explanation. But progressing it forward, okay, we're going to go to actually back to the temperature graphic real quick. As we get into Thursday, you do notice that those heat indexes spread much broader out into parts of southern lower Michigan, Indiana, and much of Ohio is included now as well. Okay, so there is actually going to be some significant heat across nearly all the Great Lakes region until you get into the Upper Peninsula. Of course, Upper Peninsula is staying chill most of the time anyway. Thank God for Lake Superior. But you are dealing with some pretty significant heat out there. Could be some heat advisories extended up into Michigan, maybe some excessive heat warnings even extended into parts of southern Michigan as well, because these are pretty hot temperatures, or feels like temperatures, and you're definitely going to want to stay hydrated, stay cool, and stay out of the sun in the heat of the day. So that's what's currently being shown. Euro kind of goes a little bit wonky with the temperature changes during the evening because it predicts MCS going from east to west. I don't think that's going to happen. That's just something that is currently being shown. Sometimes the models get a little wonky with convection when you have these large heat setups. But let's go to the thunderstorm setup now and get an idea of where we could see thunderstorms come the next couple of days. So Wednesday, again, this is going to be associated with tonight's risk into Wednesday, that marginal risk that we looked at in the Upper Peninsula. But you do have that pretty good. You have a few clusters of showers and thunderstorms ongoing during the morning. You do see that the sounding does indicate severe potential, but there's no instability. Okay, no surface cape. There is a lot of storm. There is seeming to be some storm relative felicity with the setup, some good shear in the atmosphere, so could see some damaging winds, but more likely going to be along the lines of a hail threat with those storms. So, going further into the afternoon, the Euro is picking up a few potential clusters of storms, and the reason why I'm going with the Euro is because these more prominent models, such as the NAM and the HRRR, are kind of really variable. Again, keep in mind, this could happen, this could not happen. So a lot of these models are still kind of iffy on the setup. So Wednesday evening, you see a few pop-up showers and thunderstorms popping up on the models. You do see that marginal tornado hazard type being shown there. Look at the convective inhibition, though. That's associated with that capping inversion that could be in place. Okay, now convective inhibition is about 400. That is a pretty high level. All right, so high levels of convective inhibition will inhibit thunderstorms from developing, preventing that severe weather that we could so possibly see. Okay, so Thursday, and then as we get into Friday, you do see, okay, there's where the Euro is kind of saying, oh yeah, here comes that westward moving storm. Don't think that's going to happen. Now look at these storms here, though, that are firing across eastern Michigan. Tornado potential, Cape values of around 4,000, low convective inhibition, storm relative felicity of around 100 to 300. Now again, this model shows it, but a lot of the other models don't really show this as much. So there's a lot of questions with this setup here, but there is some indication of severe weather also on Friday, and Friday might be a very good chance to chase some storms for me, especially if this continues to verify like it says it is going to. But what the Storm Prediction Center says, the focus of severe weather is going to be farther to the south, okay? And this is the more where they think the more favorable environment is going to occur, okay? Southern lower Michigan, Indiana, and the entire state of Ohio is included in that marginal risk. Now, will this continue? Okay, not entirely certain. We're going to have to wait to see what the SPC's guidelines are. But a good indicator of where we could see the strongest environment for storms is by looking at the upper air values. Okay, so let's take a look at that real quick. 500 millibar. All right, so as we go into Wednesday, you notice that Wednesday you do have some shear in the atmosphere, especially over northern Michigan, eastern Michigan, that will kind of stay in place overnight on Thursday. Could produce some severe weather. Now, as we get into Thursday night, you see that there is that potential for, or Thursday night, you do see that there's wind shear starting to go into place across parts of lower Michigan. Okay, that's Thursday night. As we get into Friday, another burst of upper level wind shear. Okay, and then the mid layer as well. Got something you also got to keep watch out for on that ridge. You've got some pretty decent mid level and upper level support for Wednesday, Thursday, and also even into. Don't really see as much support for Friday, but I do see support for Thursday and on Wednesday. So that is something that could definitely help to initiate some storms. But again, with that capping inversion in place, may not possibly occur. So many variables with this setup. Not really going to be an easy one to project where and who is exactly going to get severe weather. But just know that the environment is there. You've got that heat, you've got that humidity, and you have wind at different layers of the atmosphere that is going to support the potential for storms. The only question is, will the cap break? And that is something that really hard to tell until we get to the actual point. Again, here's the convective allowing model, the NAM, that is North American model, showing some different possibilities for a storm setup. Now, I don't really think the NAM's doing a super good job at this, but the NAM does project CAPE values to be rather elevated for storms as we get into these upcoming next few days. Let's take a look at the CAPE values. Okay, surface-based CAPE. Look at the CAPE values. Okay, CAPE values getting around 4,000, even 5,500 across Illinois and Wisconsin, and then over the lake you get CAPE values of 5,500. So definitely a lot of energy in the atmosphere, but again, keep in mind convective inhibition could be a factor. And look at the convective inhibition that we could have in the atmosphere. Okay, this convective inhibition is associated with that heat dome. Okay, not really a favorable environment for storms to fire off, but you do notice that there are some places where that cap does break. Okay, like in this area in northeastern Michigan. Now, these models will definitely change as we get to it, but as that cap breaks, we could see storms fire in those different regions. And if a storm does fire and breaks the cap, it will likely remain isolated. Potential for a very strong supercell goes up when that is necessarily the case. Okay, so lots of variables in place, lots of things to just keep in mind and keep track of as we go into the upcoming next few days. So as I continue to provide updates, I'm going to try to provide frequent updates when I can, because these are going to change relatively frequently over the next several days, or the next few hours even. But make sure to subscribe and stay updated. I'll continue to do things on YouTube, and if I go storm chasing, we will be live on YouTube and Facebook as well. So make sure to check us out on those platforms there. Thanks for watching, and peace out.